News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine on this Monday. Nick Barris coming to you. I hope you had a very pleasant weekend. We have a good show on tap for you. We're going to be busy this morning, and we're going to invite you, as always, to join in the conversation if you'd like. We've got the phone lines open. We'll take those later in the show, as well as any comments you might want to make on Facebook, as we're streaming live at newschannel5.com, as we usually do, as we talk about being on the rebound. That's what we call it here at News Channel 5, as we see the state here and across the country start rebounding from this coronavirus pandemic. A lot being done here, and this morning our first guest is in the middle of it at the legislative level, and it's good of him to take some time out of his busy Monday morning to join us, and that's Tennessee Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton. Good morning to you, sir. Can you hear me all right?
Good morning. I can hear you fine.
All right, we'll make sure the audio's up there, and I can hear you. I appreciate you coming on this morning. You know, we're in the first steps right now, as we've heard the governor lead us through this path now to reopening. And I'm curious, after this weekend, I'm wondering what you did and how you see things going at this early stage of some of the early phases of Tennessee reopening. Give me just your take right off the top.
Well, I mean, we've gone out in public and, grocery store and other retail shops. And, some people are wearing masks, some aren't. Almost all the businesses are using parts of the Tennessee Pledge or all the Tennessee Pledge and the Economic Recovery Group guidelines. So, I think people are being cautious when they go back out in public, but I think people in the economy are starting to reboot. And I think people are happy to integrate slowly to make sure that we do this successfully.
I'm the same way. I mean, this past weekend, like you, I went out, and I've been actually shopping anyway, and I try to follow the guidelines, social distancing and masks. The one thing is, and I don't know if you've noticed it, in some areas, I certainly notice a lot of people kind of just trying to go back to exactly the way it was before. And I see the clumps and the crowds and close and no one wearing masks. And I know in the past you've warned a bit, and you're concerned about the potential, as we follow the numbers, and it's still early, to have us perhaps backslide a bit. And I wonder about your concerns on that front now with what you see happening.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're going to have people on all sides. You're going to have those who are going to be very cautious and maybe not go out, and you're going to have those who feel like they can go back to normal. Then you're going to have a big mix in the middle of people who will be very cautious. So, I think what Governor Lee did, I think, in perspective was we weren't able to have PPE on hand to handle a spike. We are now have enough PPE. I think the other thing was to make sure that the hospitals have enough capacity to handle anything, because what you saw internationally and in New York and other places in the U.S. is when your hospital runs out of capacity, that's when your mortality rate really increases. So I think it was more of a flattening of the curve and trying to get us to be able to handle an influx. As we go into society, as contagious as this is, as we've seen it being more asymptomatic in Tennessee than probably what we thought it was going to be originally, I think you'll see a spike in cases. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there's more hospitalizations or more people in the units right now. So you have to be very cautious, but also try to get back on with your lives.
And I'm curious, from your perspective as Speaker of the House, and I don't know how much contact you have with the leaders in other states, and maybe especially the border states, just without a uniform policy, even though I think some of the states mirror each other what they're doing. Is there concern there that one state may be doing more than another? And, we all know that you can cross over, county, state lines, and how effective that can be if one state's doing what it thinks it should be doing, and yet you have an influx of people maybe coming from another state that are not being quite as careful.
Yeah, we've seen that with our tax base, because we border so many states, or so many states border us. So you do have to be cautious. I remember early on I was speaking to the Speaker of Alabama, Georgia, and Mississippi. And we were ahead of them on what we were doing when we were trying to take a quick recess, pass some essential bills out of the General Assembly, and the governor kind of easing us into restrictions and the shelter in place. And watching them, how they, within 7 to 10 days, they all went to that direction as well. So, I think we're watching it. I think population density is a very big key for the COVID-19. And so I think with our southern states, we're all seeing about the same number of cases as we go forward. One thing to keep in mind is with Governor Lee and his administration testing as much as they are, we are going to have more people who test positive just because we have more people who are being tested. So doesn't mean anything less or more than other states surrounding us. It just means we're doing a better job of testing and identifying.
I'm wondering what the state can do for some of the counties and some of the big cities. As you know, I mean, the federal government right now, at least, is not riding into, using as an example, Nashville to help them financially at this point. And you've probably heard also the mayor here has proposed a 32% property tax increase, which of course is a biggie at a very difficult time. Is there any more that the state can do? And I'm not just talking about Nashville, but some of these other cities, be it Knoxville, Memphis, and others, to try to help them along economically, because right now it's a real struggle.
I mean, there is. I mean, I think there's things to do. I think what you won't see is a bailout. And, I think it really goes back to previous administrations. Mayor Cooper was dealt a very tough hand based on how he came in office and how much debt and everything that was going on in Nashville. So he has a tough time balancing his budget and doing what he needs to do. But I also think this is a lesson for everybody to learn more about making sure that you budget wisely and you put money back. And that's what we've done in the General Assembly. When Governor Haslam came in, we were below $150 million. Now we're over $1.3 billion in the rainy day fund. We think we can balance this without increasing taxes. So I think there's a lot of lessons to learn here. And one of them is about governments and living within your means and not trying to overextend yourself as well.
Certainly a lot of people doing that, a lot of people out of work. I wanted to get just your take, and I would imagine you may have heard from some of your constituents who are affected by this as well. But we all know that the State Department of Labor had, it was hit suddenly with an awful lot, okay, and it shut down the computer systems as it did in states across the country. But I'm still hearing from people that feel as though they've already, gone through the process, have been approved and haven't received their unemployment, or still are having issues with it. And I understand that they were snowed under initially, but at what point in the game do you have to say, look, I mean, it's not right for some of these folks to still be out there waiting for their unemployment?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're looking into that. I think part of it too was the system that was designed. You had a huge influx, obviously, as you said, but also they had to update the system 2 or 3 times to handle the call volumes and the number of resources that were coming in. So even as you were trying to help people get through the process, until your system or software is updated to handle the increased load, is very difficult. And I know they're working very hard on doing that. That's some lessons that we need to learn as well as we go forward about the capacity that we can hold as a state, as far as trying to help people, whether it's DHS or Department of Labor, unemployment, whatever it may be. There's a lot of lessons that we can learn here and look back on. The governor did release about 30 liaisons last week to go over to Department of Labor and help them start trying to work out casework or the caseload for people. So it's been a situation, and we're continuing to work with the governor and the administration trying to speed this up.
Yeah, sometimes it may be just a matter of more people being able to be there to answer the phones, right? And more staffing along with getting that software up and running. All right, one of the keys, of course, moving forward, I think, is the contact tracing and making sure that there are enough folks both at some of the local levels, state levels, to track individuals that may have gotten sick. Now, what are you hearing about how the state is dealing with this and then the ability now to track what could be literally thousands of people as we move forward?
Well, I mean, contact tracing has been around for decades, and they've always done with tuberculosis or other types of diseases that are very contagious in the community and throughout the community. So this is a little different because of the number of people that you can infect one person in the course of a time. I think they call that the RO value. So it makes it a little bit more daunting of a challenge. So it's a normal process that's always been going through. This is presenting a little different challenge due to the number of people. But it's important to know that if you've been in contact with somebody, to at least notify you to let you know that you've been around someone who has tested positive or shows the symptoms, so that you can quarantine yourself. And that's one way that we've seen other nations be able to control the spread or the infection rate of the virus. So it's important because we've always done it, and this is a little bit different type of contact tracing than what we've probably done over the past.
Oh yeah, something that's just on a scale like something we've probably never seen before. Wanted to also ask you, as we just bounce around to some of these different topics, things that have been in the news, are you satisfied right now with the level of information transparency or otherwise that comes out in terms of monitoring what's happening in some of these nursing homes and assisted living facilities, which clearly, you know, there have been some out there that have not reported any cases and have apparently done a very good job of it. Others have had, as you've seen, you know, basically outbreaks within their facilities, sometimes maybe because of, you know, just it's going to happen, it's out there. Others perhaps because of neglect. What do you think?
Yeah, I can't get into the neglect part, but I think with this, because I don't know enough about that or if that's even a possibility. What I do know is it does show that when COVID-19 gets into a very close contact environment where people interact with each other over an 8-hour shift or over a 24-hour day, and they're within close contact, what can happen if something gets in there? So I think that's a lesson. You saw it in Gallatin, you saw it up my way in Monterey.
Right.
So nursing homes are very particular place we got to be very careful. And also because they're a vulnerable population on what this attacks as well. So we have to be very cautious. I think the nursing homes have gotten the protocols underway. I think they've got PPE now, which was a concern early on. I think they have PPE to make them to where they can now do a little bit better of a job. And the governor has decided to test every nursing home, every person in a nursing home in the state of Tennessee to really see what's going on. But I think they've learned, and you've seen less happening in nursing homes as far as COVID-19 going in and going out.
Yeah, I certainly hope in that regard more testing will make a difference. Just last question for you. I know the governor almost every day now has a news conference later in the afternoon. I'm curious, how often do you meet or talk with him? And are you privy to some of the discussions beforehand on a daily basis in terms of them going over just, I assume he sits there and you sit there and you're talking to the experts. What's the latest? How does that play out?
Yeah, I mean, we talk probably a few times every week. Every now and then we'll have an in-person meeting, not a lot, but you know, I mean, they're as transparent as they can be, and there's just so much information. So, you know, the day-to-day issues, and when there's the bigger issues, we, Lieutenant Governor and myself and the governor or his staff, we talk through it. If there are different things to go through that they're trying to do executive order on policy. But there's just things that you know that they're having to make decisions that they can't talk to the General Assembly about. That's outside the General Assembly domain technically. So there's been good communication back and forth between us. And, you know, I mean, he's making the best decisions that he can. And the one thing I have learned in these roles as we get into here, I don't have all the information that he has. And so I'm not going to question his decisions. I know his heart. I know the type of person he is. And I know that he's making the best decisions based on the information that he has that I probably don't have at the time.
Last question for you before we say goodbye. I know some of the restaurants obviously opening, businesses getting back up and running that had maybe been shut down. Just wanted to get your take. We saw this past weekend NASCAR was back. We saw some golf. I mean, do you think you're going to see any UT football games this fall or Titans games?
The only thing I thought was on was The Last Dance. I didn't know anything else.
Yeah, that was good, wasn't it? I watched the last episode of that with Michael Jordan, but that made me hungry for more sports, whether it's the NBA or anything else. And I don't know. I mean, that's something, you know, that everyone's going to be watching very closely. We've seen some states, California already saying some of their universities aren't going to play. I know the Southeastern Conference, and I know you're not talking to them specifically about sports, but the University of Tennessee planning to have classes. I mean, do you think that sporting events and that classes will move forward, or is it something truly, if things take a step back, they could change their mind and say, no, we're going to hold off?
Well, the one thing you do have to be right now, and we'll probably have to be this way for another year to year and a half, is you have to be fluid. And so you every day is a new day, and so you may have to take a step back to move 2 steps forward sometimes. So I think we're hopeful, and I'm hopeful that you will have some type of football season, whether it's a truncated schedule or something of that nature. Basketball might be a little bit more easier to do because you can spread people out in the bigger arenas to a certain degree or not have people there. So I think we've seen it. I think NASCAR was a very interesting dynamic where they're doing their races without any crowds there. But it'll be interesting to see how many people turned in and viewed in and how many people were wanting to do that. So I think there's hope out there. I really do. I think in the golf world, I think the golfers still miss the crowd, but they won't have to get heckled. So they might like that.
I was going to say, it's a whole different dynamic. Home field advantage out the window without fans. Speaker Sexton, listen, thank you for joining us this morning. Really appreciate it. Hope you'll make yourself available to us again, perhaps down the road, and give my best to Doug Kuffner.
Will do. Thank you very much.
Thank you, my friend. All right. We're going to take a break. That was Tennessee Speaker of the House, Cameron Sexton, talking about where the state stands at this point as we continue to reopen, and just interesting to get some of his take on it. We're going to take some phone calls as well if you want to follow up on what he just said. And our next guest joining us here in just a few minutes. We'll take some calls after this next break. We'll be joined by Joe Ivey, all right? And he's going to follow up on what the speaker has said, going into more specifics. He's from Lipscomb University. And the question of, as we reopen, and we've heard about some businesses still struggling, some not able to reopen because they just went bankrupt, which is awful, and folks still out of work. Are we facing the potential of the R word, that being a recession, and more, and what the keys are to getting back up and running as we slowly see it's happening, which is a good thing. We'll take a break. Take some of your phone calls and comments if you'd like on Facebook as well at newschannel5.com. And then stick around too. Joe Ivey, I think it'll be an interesting look at the state's economy. We'll be back right after this.